life or tell you what to do. The natural instinct of the individual on the receiving end is to go into child mode because the other person is an authoritative voice or has a very commanding. Therefore, you go into child mode. You're a little bit nervous or defensive or whatever it is because you're now like the receiver mode. Voluntarily, or somebody on their own goes into child mode, then they kind of push the person they're talking to into parent mode where they want to start giving advice or giving answers. And the idea you're seeing each other as equal. Why is this so important? As a heads up, I'm using a different internet as well. So if there are challenges, just let me know or put it in the chat and I'll make sure that I repeat anything that you've missed. Okay. So let's take a look in this week's parsha. We're talking about the Mishkan in the desert, which is referred to in the Torah as the Ohel Mo'ed. That's the name that the Torah gives to this Mishkan. Let's look in the highlighted verse 42. Let's look at the last line of verse 42, where Hashem is telling Moshe, this is the tent of meeting, where I will arrange meetings with you to speak with you there. I want to focus on the Hebrew because the Hebrew are the words that really determine the meaning over here. What does Hashem say? Asher ivoid lachem shama l'daber lachem sham, that this is going to be like a designated place. Ivoid is like that word of moed, the word of designated, where I'm going to talk to you or meet with you. And let's look at verse number 43. Verse number 43 says, there, in the same, talking about the same place, I will arrange meetings with the children of Israel, and it will be sanctified by my glory. So in a way, this is redundant. In other words, Hashem just told Moshe, this is the place where I'm going to meet with you, or I'm going to talk to you. And this is also the place where I'm going to meet with the children of Israel, and my name will be sanctified. So what does Rashi do? I see there's a chat here. I'll try to fix that, but it's here. Let me see if I can fix that like this. Is that better?
For me, you're still on the text, but it's not a big deal. I can follow what you're saying.
I'll see if I can make it smaller. Yeah, let me see if I could. All right, is that better? Or any different? I'm moving the box.
No different, but I'm gonna change my way of seeing it. So I think that'll fix it.
Perfect. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. Go for it.
All right. So it's a different computer, so it could be that's what's causing the challenge. All right. Anyway, so and there's a recording, so I'm happy to share the recording afterwards if there's parts that didn't come through clearly. Okay, so Rashi jumps on these two, obviously, as he does, jumps on these two verses. So the first verse where it says, here's the place where I'm going to meet with you, where I'm going to arrange meetings with you, that's the words that Rashi highlights. Okay, when I arrange an appointment to speak with you, I will arrange it there to come there. I'll arrange it there to come there. In other words, Hashem's telling Moshe that when I talk to you, that's where it's going to be. That's the first verse. That's the verse that we read that was highlighted. Right? Let me go back a second. Wrong direction. Okay. Back to the highlighted 42, where Hashem is saying that this is the place I'm going to meet with you. And Rashi is pointing out, Hashem is telling him where he's going to do the talking to Moshe. Now, the words that are being used here, Ohel Mo'ed. Ohel Mo'ed means a designated place. Second. Well, an appointed place, but Mo'ed on its own could mean an appointed time and place. So a Jewish holiday is referred to as a Mo'ed because it's a designated day and time, and it's like it has a significance on that day. So the Ohel Mo'ed is Hashem telling Moshe that this is the place, the designated place where I'm going to meet with you. Now, the second verse, where it's kind of redundant, is where Hashem is saying, and I'm going to arrange meetings there with the children of Israel. Now, it's not totally redundant because there it's talking about Moshe and now it's talking about the children of Israel. But it is redundant a little bit because Hashem could have just said, that is the spot where I'm going to meet with you and with the children of Israel. So in a way, the fact that it's a whole separate verse and the word nodaiti or ivoid are both used twice, are both used, is a bit of a redundancy. So Rashi comes in over here and he also highlights those words. And what does he say? I'm going to arrange meetings there. I will gather with them to speak like a king who appoints meeting places to talk with his subjects there. So Rashi highlights both verses and gives a bit of a understanding or a background, but there's a problem here. Rashi doesn't mention the fact that they're redundant, which kind of seems that, as we know, Rashi doesn't answer a question if he feels there's no question, and if he does answer a question, it means he does say something. He means he does feel there is a question. But in this case, Rashi doesn't mention the redundancy at all, which means that Rashi doesn't see this as redundant or extra. Doesn't even see it as a question or a need to be explained. So what is Rashi really telling us? And if he doesn't see a question, he doesn't want to explain the redundancy, then why does he mention anything at all? What is he adding? Let's go back to his text over here. Rashi over here on the second verse says, this is the place where I'm going to meet, where I'm going to gather the people, I'm going to talk like a king meets with their subjects. And in the previous verse, Rashi says that this is the place where I'm going to meet with you. So it's but Rashi doesn't just add in words just to explain. There has to be something Rashi's here to try and point out, but redundancy isn't a problem for Rashi. So now let us break this down very simply. This is not a complex idea, but the fact that it's brought out this way and is simply by Rashi is the brilliance of this discussion. So back to our idea of meetings versus a lecture, right? You go to a lecture, it's a one person speaking and everyone else is listening. A meeting has that concept that there's two individuals that are, or more than two individuals that are coming together and having a conversation as equals. So to Rashi, the first verse where he says, this is the place, telling Moshe, this is the place where I'm going to talk to you, that is Hashem telling Moshe, you are going to be the listener in this situation. Here's where I'm going to give you information, content, Torah laws, or whatever else I need to talk to you about. That's going to be the spot where I do the talking and you're going to do the listening. Very clear. So Hashem says, this is the place I'm going to speak to you. And as we point out, as you can see here on the screen, it's not just Moshe, it's the entire Jewish people, because everything that was said to Moshe was meant to be passed on and taught to the Jewish people. However, the second commentary, where he gives the elaboration of a king talking to the subjects, and he uses the word meeting. In the second verse, Hashem is talking about the meeting aspect, where it's not just a one side talking and one side listening, but this is a place where there's reciprocation between the two. Now, being a king talking to his subjects is still not an equality type of meeting. There's still the king and there's the subjects. However, the king expects to have some sort of reciprocation from his subjects. So if a king calls a council meeting, he's not calling a council meeting, or a good king at least, is not calling a council meeting just to tell everyone here's what's going to happen in the nation or in the province. He's calling the meeting because he wants advice and he wants feedback. So yes, it may have to be done with respect and with certain, in certain framework, but it is still meant to be a reciprocal event where two entities or two individuals are conversing and having a kind of unification. So that being the case, what exactly is Hashem telling us that we're going to have a place where Hashem tells Moshe and us, where he does the talking and we do the listening? And what is the idea that Hashem is going to converse with us? As they say, when you talk to Hashem, as we do 3 times a day through prayer, great. Hashem starts talking to you, then you have to be worried. You have to be scared. So what's going on? I'm telling Moshe by saying, this is the place I'm going to converse with you. And this is where Rashi's brilliance and the message comes through. So let us first go to the concept of humility in coming together with another individual. As humans, we have this natural need to be validated and to be heard. So if you go to a meeting, and not everyone's like this, this is more of a generalization. I'm just trying to use it as a springboard to our conversation. We all have this part of us that just wants other people to hear us and validate us, or not, even if not to validate us, to hear us. I don't know a single individual that doesn't like to have the opportunity to share something that they're interested in and passionate about and knowledge, and have others congratulate that individual or thank that individual or compliment that individual on how masterful their delivery was. We all have that kind of need, and when we're given that opportunity, some of us take it. Some of us are more reserved and shy and don't just share knowledge or information if we're not called upon. Some of us, as it says in Pirkei Avot, that the advice for the wise is to remain silent. In other words, don't just talk and talk. Don't be that person, and that's true in many cases. So, what is the true method to really have a meeting or to have a conversation that is meaningful to everyone involved? I can't even tell you how many times I've been involved in meetings where I thought one thing was discussed or I understood one thing, and then other people totally took something totally different or a totally different message from the meeting that to me didn't even cross my mind and still didn't cross my mind after I heard that. And this happens all the time where there's a disconnect in communication at meetings because everybody has their own either agenda or thought process in mind. And it's very hard to get everyone on the same page and into the same idea. And there's lots of topics about this, and we're not here to figure out how to have better corporate meetings. But what is the underlying principle or challenge that exists with this? And the truth is, this is where Rashi is coming to tell us something. That there's a sense of humility and there's a sense of recognizing the value of the other individual, regardless if you know it or see it or could articulate it. But the fact that you respect the other person as a person immediately gives you a sense of ability to absorb anything that they have to share with you. And the same goes vice versa. One of the really, really great stories that Rabbi Weiss likes to tell is a story about charity is when the Alter Rebbe, when the first Chabad Rebbe was visiting a town, and he found out that there was a wedding, supposed to be a wedding that night, and the groom was kidnapped by the police, which were corrupt, and was basically held for ransom, knowing that the Jewish community would raise a ton of money to rescue him because it was his wedding that night. So when the Alter Rebbe heard about this, he gathered a few people and he started to go fundraise. And he asked people in the village to tell him who are the individuals who have the means or the capacity to donate. And they started telling him, and then they mentioned, oh yeah, there's just one person, he's a miser. A miser means that they're stingy, they don't give, don't even bother. But he's very wealthy, he can give, but he only gives this rusty coin and nothing, and that's it. So don't even bother going. And to make a long story short, the Alter Rebbe said, we're going to go to him first. And the Alter Rebbe, and they're all saying it's a waste of time. He lives far away in the town. It's a long walk, and to get into his estate is hard, and there's so many steps and places to climb. By the time you get to his doorstep, it's a lot of work, and he's just gonna give you a little coin worth a couple pennies. The Alter Rebbe was adamant, we're going to this individual first. When they arrive at this individual's door, he greets them very nicely and very warmly, and the Alter Rebbe asks if he could come in, and he shares the whole story about the groom that needs to be ransomed. And the individual is listening in very, very intently, and he's very respectful. He says, you really moved me today. And he says, let me go bring you a donation. And he goes into his office and he comes back with a rusty old little coin. And he hands it lovingly to the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe takes that coin and he says, thank you so much. Thank you for your gift. Thank you for doing your part and contributing to this mitzvah of redeeming captives in order to, especially on his wedding day. And he gives them all these blessings. And he starts to walk out. And when he walks out, the man calls him back. The rich man, I want to give you more. And he gives him more. And then the Alter Rebbe thanks him. And then it goes on until finally this wealthy individual I used to be a poor man myself. And when people would come ask me for donations, all I had was this rusty old coin. And that's what I would offer. And they would always throw it back at me saying, this is worthless. This is not the kind of donation I'm looking for. And they would basically not be interested. And I decided that when I became rich, I decided that, I'm not going, that this is still going to be the same coin that I'm going to give until somebody values it and values what I'm offering, because at least I was at least trying to give, and nobody was appreciating that. Whether he was right or wrong, or whether it's justified or not, the point is that by the expecting what he brought to the table, regardless of if it was fair or not fair, or justified or not justified, that valid communication, or any sense of having an impact on somebody else, or us, or somebody else having an impact on us and teaching us, is because in order for there to be any sense of transfer of knowledge or transfer of inspiration or learning from anything, there has to be a humility that you don't know it all. As the Baal Shem Tov taught, that what does it mean to discover God in everything is that we should try and learn a lesson from everything and everyone that we see. There's no human being and no individual, no creature, nothing in this world that doesn't have a lesson to teach us. But what's the first step to doing that, to being able to learn, to being receptive? What's the first step? Is a sense of humility that you don't know it all, a sense of humility that there's always something that someone else could offer you, value, knowledge, whatever it is, and being able to respect that is a automatic connector between you and this other individual. So now the Rebbe is going to break down what Rashi is saying over here and how this plays a role in the idea of relationships and in the idea of communication. So the first verse that we read, I will arrange a meeting, Hashem telling Moshe, I'll arrange a meeting, refers to the appointment of a place, as Onkelos translates it, a place dedicated and assigned to a specific purpose. The second verse has a different meaning. And over here, Hashem is saying, I will arrange a meeting, means I will gather with them. In other words, I'm not going to gather above them. I'm going to gather with them. I'm there to talk, and I'm there to meet with them. A house of gathering where the nation comes together. This means that the title of the Ohel Mo'ed has two meanings. One, it's a dedicated place where Hashem spoke to Moshe. And B, it's a gathering house for the Jewish people where they connect with Hashem. Now, we know that the Jewish people were not able to see Hashem or hear Hashem. They Hashem through Moshe. So when Hashem says that I will gather with the people, where was the dual communication? It's very nice to talk in theory, but we were doing the praying, the Kohanim were doing the talking, we were doing the talking and the prayers, but where's the reciprocation from Hashem talking to us? And that's what we want. That's what we're going to talk about, and this is what we do. So let us go here. So we're going to continue with the Rebbe's commentary, and then we're going to draw it into the reality of our daily lives. So Rashi adds the words, I will gather with them to speak. Because this verse is, I, Hashem, will arrange meetings there. This means that it's not just a gathering house for Jews to meet each other. It is a place where Hashem spends time with the people. So it can't just be like a gathering, like a place where, like a meeting room, an open, empty room. But this is where Hashem actually connects with us and reciprocates with us. So therefore, Rashi doesn't want us to think that this is just a place where Hashem talks to Moshe and talks to the Jewish people. But no, this is a place where we actually connect in a sense of meeting, and a sense of unity and sort of as equals, or at least some level of reciprocation between the two of us at this specific place. And that's why Rashi says, I will gather with them to speak, because this verse says, I will arrange a meeting there. This means that it's not just a gathering for a gathering house for Jews to meet each other. It's a place where Hashem spends time with the people. And therefore, Rashi has to specify how Hashem bonds with the nation in this place, and this answer is through speech. Now, what is speech? So we're going to get to this. The first thing we have to talk about is the word ad and ve'ah. We're going to take a minute or two to explain this. This is a little Kabbalistic. But there's a verse in the Nevi'im, from the prophets, where it says, Shuva Yisrael, return, O Israel, ad Hashem Elokecha, until God your Lord. In other words, in the word ad, that until is discussed in Kabbalah and Chassidus and in depth. What does it mean until? Why not all the way to Hashem? Do you go home till your house, or you go inside your house? So what's the word ad? In other words, you're going up to God, like you're getting close to God, but you're not actually getting there. You're getting to the fence, but you're not getting there. What does that really mean? So when it comes to God, when it comes to Hashem's revelations to us and his connections with us, we can never understand who God is for himself. That's beyond our comprehension. However, reach the point where everything that God does want to share with us becomes visible to us and appreciated by us in a way that we can actually absorb it, and in a way that we can actually, internalize it within our lives. So, in a sense, it's not there's no way to unite. There's no way to become part of God Himself. That's something that's in God's infinite self. We're still finite. But ad means that we could reach the point, was that there's a way we could reach the point of understanding and appreciating God's relationship with the world and with the rest of us. Another way to look at the word ad is that instead of spelling it with a patach, which says ad, which means until or up to, you could also put a tzedei there, which changes the meaning from until, till aid, which means witness. That you become a witness of God's greatness. You become a witness of God's existence, which is another example of what we're trying to achieve through our connection with Hashem, which we're going to explain in a second. Now, what is the word ve'ad? Because one verse uses the word ad. The first verse uses ad. The second verse uses ve'ad. Ve'ad or vad means a gathering or a group, which means a unity. How does that play into role? How does that play into role? So this is a few verses from Job in the book of Eov, but I'm not going to read them. There's one element over here where it talks about darkness that for the rest of us that don't see godliness, to us, all we see is the darkness. But the commentaries, the Talmud explains what these verses are. Remember, the verses from Nach can be very cryptic, and we need the sages to help us understand what they're saying. So here's an example of that. So it says in Eov, it says in Job, darkness, cloud, and fog surround him. As the verse states, he makes darkness his hiding place, that he hides in the darkness. In other words, he makes himself invisible. Right? That's the idea of Hashem concealing His presence, or concealing His light, concealing His connection with us, even though it's there. But how could you apply the term or even the concept of darkness or a sense of lacking to God? God is infinite. What does it mean there's darkness within God's revelation? So the explanation is that doesn't mean darkness literally by God, because God for Himself, nothing's ever dark. God sees everything. God is everything. The darkness only applies to those of us who are on the outside looking in, trying to see God. Who is God? How do we connect with God? That's where the darkness exists. It's almost like a two-way window, or a two-way screen where for Hashem everything is lit. For God, there's just no limitations. It's all infinite. God for Himself is beyond our comprehension. However, for us that created by God and living in a finite existence, and we want to have some sort of connection or some sort of ability to understand what it is that's keeping us alive, we want to see through that darkness to get a glimpse of what is this revelation, what is this force of energy of God that is creating the world, constantly creating the world. How do we do that? So I'm sorry, I'm skipping these little texts over here, but we do that through the mitzvos. Bear with me. What is a mitzvah? Most people in the Jewish community, unfortunately, will tell you a mitzvah means a good deed. Doing anything nice is a mitzvah. And that's partially true, but it's not the truth. The real idea of a mitzvah is that it comes from the word safsa, which is a connector. What makes a mitzvah a connector between us and Hashem? How does wearing tzitzis, or putting on tefillin, or wearing a talis, or saying Shema, or whatever it is, the mitzvah that we're doing, how does that connect us with Hashem? It's because godliness for Himself, God for Himself, is beyond our comprehension, is infinite, and there's no way for a finite creature or a finite world to have a connection with God. So because the purpose of creation was for the mitzvahs to be done in this world by God, by His essence, so when we do a mitzvah, we tap in to the essence of Hashem. In other words, we overcome our finite limitations through the mitzvah because that's what Hashem wants. It's when you get somebody a gift that they actually want, that you know that they want, they put on a registry. You connect with them in a way, not just because it's your idea and what you like that you're giving them, but you're giving them what they want. Means your connection to them is now about them, not necessarily about you. It's a humility, it's a submission. And when it comes to God, when we do what Hashem wants, because this is what Hashem wants, not because it makes us feel good, not because it makes sense to us logically, or we think it has, health benefits, but we do it because this is what Hashem wants us to do, then we are connecting to the essence and the infinite existence of Hashem. And that's the idea of a witness. Many of the mitzvos are referred to as edus, which means the testimony or witness, which in fact, in terms of categorizing the mitzvos, there are some mitzvos that are referred to as mishpatim, which are the logical ones. There are some referred to ones beyond comprehension. And then there's the edus. But sometimes all mitzvos are referred to as edus because they bear witness to the fact that so we are testifying that Hashem exists through that mitzvah. So we become a witness of Hashem, meaning we become a spark, an ambassador, godliness in the world, and spreading that spark into the rest of the world. Now, what is the happens through the mitzvah, and how does this play back to the Ohel Mo'ed? So we're going to quote the Talmud from Shabbos, from the tractate of Shabbos. Now, Sheshetz asked. The verse says that, this is talking about the menorah, that the Kohen, the high priest, will set the candles outside the curtain. In other words, in the holy, in the Kodesh, not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And that menorah will be a testimony that Hashem exists, right? So he asks the question, does Hashem require light? Did the Jews not travel 40 years in the desert to God's light? We didn't have a menorah. We did once we built the Mishkan, but the point is that wasn't the light. He doesn't need our light. So what's the point of the menorah? Rather, these candles testify to all citizens of the world. Notice that it's not just the Jewish people, it's the entire world, that the divine presence dwells amongst the Jewish people. That the menorah was a testimony that the light of Hashem, that the light of God dwells within the Jewish people, and from there to the rest of the world. So the Talmud asks, what is the nature of this testimony? What is this testimony? So Rav answers, and he says that the specific one candle on the east side of the menorah, which was always lit, it would stay lit miraculously until all the other candles were lit, and then it would be relit. In other words, it stood as like what we know today as the shamash. The menorah in the temple didn't have the shamash, so that eastern candle was like the shamash that miraculously would burn for 24 hours, even though it didn't have the sufficient oil to do so, but that was one of the miracles of the Beis Hamikdash. That miracle that took place within the menorah was the testimony that the light of Hashem dwells within the Jewish people and is there to light up the rest of the world. So, before we go further, what we have here is a message from Rashi telling us that the relationship that we have with Hashem is not something that has to be abstract or is always abstract, but Hashem is making it very clear with the two verses. The first verse is Hashem talking to Moshe. That we can understand. Moshe is the greatest prophet of all time. Hashem is talking to him. Moshe comes down and makes it simple for us, at least to our ancestors, and then eventually down, through all the commentaries through us. But that makes sense. But that we, the rest of us, all our simple people, all have a part in the Ohel Mo'ed, and to be in the Ohel Mo'ed, in the Mishkan, and have a relationship with Hashem. That is, whoa, what's going on? But the answer to that is the menorah and the mitzvos. The menorah is the miracle of Hashem saying, I am with you, I am dwelling within you. But the reciprocation is when we do a mitzvah, we automatically become a conduit, a funnel of light of Hashem to the rest of the world. We become that light unto the nations that we're meant to be. We are basically God's spokesman. When you do a mitzvah, you become God's emissary and agent in the world, spreading the light of Hashem. And that's the reciprocation of the meeting, of the unity that is happening when we are meeting Hashem in the Ohel Mo'ed. I want to go back to the communication side for a second and to the sense of communication. One of the big challenges that exist within partnerships or marriages, relationships, business partnerships, you name it, is not necessarily a sense of compatibility, but a sense of status. So when one partner when one partner brings more to a relationship than the other partner, let's say it's a marriage, right? When one partner brings more, whatever you want to define as more or less, that whatever you think. But when one partner brings more, the other one could feel inferior and feel like they're not good enough. or the one that brings more could feel like, why am I, the breadwinner for everything and I don't get anything from my partner? Whichever side that negativity comes from, and that could cause real challenges in a marriage. In a business partnership, if you have one side bringing all the value to the table and the other partner is bringing much less value, then you have a problem. Because when there's a lack of equal value, there becomes a communication disconnect. So when we talk about our partnership with Hashem, it's very easy to feel inferior. How are we supposed to be Hashem's partners to make this world into a dwelling place for Hashem? How is that possible? We're finite, we're human, we're limited. Hashem is God, is infinite. How could there be any sense of partnership between us and Hashem? One of the interesting things that you learn in a relationship, specifically a marriage, but also, specifically a marriage, is that it's not enough to provide for your spouse. It's not enough to be a really good spouse and do all the good things. You have to be vulnerable and make that other person be needed in your life, because they need to feel not just conceptually, but in reality, they need to be actually providing something to you that you need them. When Hashem comes to Moshe and says, I talk to you in Ohel Mo'ed to give you the instructions and teach you Torah, and I'm also going to come and converse with the people, as Rashi stresses, with the people. Hashem is telling us that he needs us, to be his partners to do the mitzvos in the world. And by doing that, he is lowering himself. In other words, Hashem is showing us his humility and his vulnerability, even though that's not a word we could really use for Hashem. But it's basically Hashem giving us that opportunity to say we are actually providing something that Hashem wants us to do. Like the example given, when a very famous person or celebrity comes and asks a simple person to do a favor, they feel very special, they feel honored. Hashem is coming down to us and giving us that opportunity to do the mitzvos, which is his way of communicating to us that he needs us. And that is the dual dynamic that happens between us and Hashem from the Ohel Mo'ed. So this wasn't just something that the Mishkan, only when it stood, this is something that was being established and lasted throughout all lasts even until now, to all the generations of Jewish people, that we are Hashem's partners, we are Hashem's ambassadors to bring the light to the rest of the world. And it's a two-way street. Hashem has to take care of us. Hashem has to do what he needs to do for us and bring down those blessings that we desperately need. And then we do for Hashem by being his partner, by spreading the light. So I'm going to skip this slide up here. I want to go to some final texts. So this is the famous prayer, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is the prayer that we say biblically twice a day, morning and night. And it's one of the most important and most famous prayers of Judaism. It's also a verse in Deuteronomy. Now, if you look at the last letter of each of the first word and the last letter of the last word, you'll notice, and they're of course highlighted, that they have this same message, the ayin and the daled, which spells out the word aid, witness. And when we do a mitzvah, we become the witnesses of Hashem's presence in the world and the partners of Hashem to bring that into reality. And this is why the Shema prayer is so important, because by doing that, we are connecting and we are acting as that witness to become Hashem's ambassadors of light in the rest of the world. So the large letters ayin and daled spell the word aid, which means witness. This alludes to the passage, and you are my witnesses, says Hashem, that Hashem partners with us and gives us that sense of vulnerability that he needs us to fulfill these mitzvos in order to as the Ramban says, some commandments are testimonials because they remember his wonders and testify to them. This includes the matzah, the sukkah, the Pesach sacrifice, Shabbos, tefillin, and mezuzah. And soon we're going to say Purim, and even though it's rabbinical mitzvos, but it's mitzvos that testify to Hashem's miracles that he's done to save us. Now, there's a concept that we're not going to go through in depth over here. But there's a concept in the Chassidic circles that's known as a farbrengen. Now, a farbrengen is sometimes misunderstood as having a speaker come farbreng with you and talk to you. But a real farbrengen, or the real concept of a farbrengen, was individuals coming to be vulnerable and coming to connect with each other in order to strengthen each other and uplift each other. And the way you would do this is by saying l'chaim. By saying l'chaim, you break down those barriers, you break down the facade that sometimes separates us, and you're able to unite around it and warm yourselves up in order to help each other overcome the challenges of life and reconnect, which is the idea of coming together, the idea of what we call a skalus, the unity that was meant to be felt in the Ohel Mo'ed. I want to go straight to the key points here. I'm sorry, we're not going to read the text about the farbrengen. This is a topic that really deserves its own class. But the ultimate sense is that we are partners of Hashem, and we are Hashem's ambassadors, and we are the two-way street of Hashem giving us the energy and the power and life in order to exist in the world, in order to fulfill that mission. So let's go to those key points. That the Mishkan is called the tent of meeting, the Ohel Mo'ed, in two consecutive verses. But the meaning is different. One is Hashem addressing the nation, which is just Hashem talking. It's the lecture. But the second one is people coming together with Hashem. We reciprocate Hashem's messages by becoming ambassadors of light and by fulfilling the mitzvos. So it's not just a one person talking to the other. There's a sense of unity between the two. And that's really the message that we want to take from it, is that every mitzvah that we do gives us the opportunity to reciprocate Hashem's messages, reciprocate what Hashem's talking what Hashem is talking to us, teaching us, but also fulfilling that return part of it where we do the mitzvos and fulfill that message and fulfill that mission that we have in the world. And once we finish, or once we fulfill all the mitzvos that we're meant to be doing, that's when Hashem brings Mashiach, and we're able to see darkness, and the darkness actually becomes light, and we're able to have that revelation that we've been promised with the coming of Mashiach. Thank you all so much for joining, and may it be a wonderful may everyone have happiness and health. And we will next week, because it is Purim, we're going to have our class on Wednesday night, I believe.
Okay, you'll send us an email to remind us, please?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you for tonight's class. I'm sorry to be a little bit late. I had something else I had to be on, but it's nice to catch the end of it.
No worries.